This is Miss Johnson. She's 25 years old and she's single. This is Mr. Smith. He's 29 years old and he's also single. One day, Miss Johnson went shopping at the supermarket and met Mr. Smith. They fell in love and got married the next day. 2 days later, Mr. Smith and Mrs. Johnson had an argument and they broke up. The very next day, Miss Johnson walked to the park for a stroll. She saw a handsome young man named Mr. Williams. They fell in love and got married the next day. Unfortunately, after the wedding, Mr. Williams was hit by a car and died. One day, Miss Johnson was on the bus. She met a young man named Mr. Jones. They fell in love immediately, and Mr. Jones asked Miss Johnson to marry him. They traveled overseas and visited many beautiful places. They stayed at a romantic one-star hotel. 2 days later, Mrs. Johnson gave birth to a beautiful young boy. One day, Mrs. Johnson went to the supermarket to buy some milk for her baby. Unfortunately, on her way home, she was hit by a truck and died. Mr. Jones was very sad and cried for many days. 2 days later, Mr. Jones met a beautiful young woman named Miss Moore. They fell in love and immediately got engaged. The very next day, Miss Moore married Dave, and they lived happily ever after for the next 2 days. The end. This is a true story. Past simple. Regular and irregular verbs. We use the past simple to talk about completed actions in the past. How do we change regular verbs from the base form into the past simple? For most regular verbs, we add ed at the end of the verb. For example, walk becomes walked. Miss Johnson walked to the park for a stroll. For verbs ending with e, we add d. Die becomes died. She was hit by a truck and died. Remember, die and died are verbs. Dead is the adjective. For verbs ending with a consonant and y, we delete the y and add ied. Marry becomes married. Miss Moore married Dave. Married in this sentence is a verb. They fell in love and got married. Married in this sentence is not a verb. It's actually an adjective. Got is actually the main verb. In English, we don't put two verbs together. So if you see two verbs next to each other, one of them is probably not a verb. For verbs ending with a vowel and y, we don't delete the y, we just add ed. Stay becomes stayed. They stayed at a romantic one-star hotel. For verbs ending with consonant, vowel, and consonant, we usually double the last consonant and add ed. Travel becomes traveled. They traveled overseas. In American English, traveled is spelled with one L. So American English doesn't always follow this rule. However, even in other types of English, this rule isn't always true. For example, visit becomes visited. Visited is spelt with one T. They visited many beautiful places. So you just have to remember the words that don't follow this rule. These verbs are called regular verbs. They follow a rule to change into the past simple. However, some verbs don't follow any rules. These verbs are called irregular verbs. For example, go, went, meet, met, fall, fell, have, had, break, broke, see, saw, get, got, give, gave. One day, Miss Johnson went shopping at the supermarket and met Mr. Smith. Of course, we also need to remember the past tense of am, is, and are. Am becomes was. Is also becomes was. Are becomes were. Miss Johnson was on the bus. And finally, we change past simple sentences into the negative by adding didn't and changing the past simple verb into the base form. Did is the past tense of do. We change the main verb into the base form because we can't have two past tense verbs in the same past simple clause. For example, the negative of went is didn't go, not didn't went. Miss Johnson went shopping at the supermarket. Miss Johnson didn't go shopping at the supermarket. For was and were, the negative forms are wasn't and weren't. Wasn't is the contraction of was not. Weren't is the contraction of were not. Mr. Jones was very sad. Mr. Jones wasn't very sad. In summary, for most regular verbs, we add ed. For verbs ending with an e, we add d. For verbs ending with a consonant and y, we delete the y and add ied. For verbs ending with a vowel and y, we don't delete the y, we just add ed. For verbs ending with consonant, vowel, and consonant, we usually double the last consonant and add ed. For irregular verbs, you just have to remember the past simple forms because there are no rules. And to change positive past simple sentences into the negative, we add didn't and change the past simple verb into the base form. And of course, the negatives of was and were are wasn't and weren't. If you've enjoyed our video, please visit our website at ulmanzu.com to check out our latest videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe button. And remember to like, comment, and share our videos with your friends.